like you said about the fossils. I mean, there's nothing about fossils that says uniformitarianism. I mean, how do they explain fossils of animals giving birth, fish being eaten? I mean, it doesn't take millions of years for a fish to finish his breakfast. So that
Well, no.
suggests sudden rapid burial, right, Dr. Grady?
Well, just we've even found schools of fish, pods of whales that
Wow.
all died together, buried together in articulation. Now, remember too, evolutionists believe in this tree of life or shrubs of life, but branching regardless.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, every phylum in the animal and plant kingdom starts at least at the Cambrian, and we have found fossils of creatures that are supposed to be Cambrian or later, even in Precambrian layers. And this is, again, speaking of a worldwide flood where these creatures lived and were buried alive, even if they drowned because they were mobile, but still buried in wet mud layers, which then hardened into sedimentary rock. So everywhere we look, we see the refutation of biological or physical evolution.
Exactly right, Dr. Grady. When it comes to, because you mentioned, the tree of life, evolution, universal common ancestry, how do we respond to militant atheists and evolutionists, say, such as Aaron Ra, who look to nested hierarchies, phylogeny, taxonomy, cladistics, all these things to say, prove universal common ancestry, that we're all related? How do we appropriately respond to those types of arguments as creationists, Dr. Grady?
Well, Mr. Ra is a great, enthusiastic believer in cladistics.
Yes,
Uh, he thinks that's the answer to everything.
he does.
Now, as I mentioned on a program in which we were both on, this is again the second worst method of proof in science and proves nothing at all. It is really the proof by ranking, ranking. The proof by ranking is the ability to line things up by size and shape in a logical order or sequence. Cladistics is nothing more than that. It is not scientific proof. It is not data. It is simply pictures lined up by size and shape. And he thinks that because he can line things up by size and shape, that this proves evolution. But it doesn't. It disproves evolution. Now, the simple example of the fallacy of the proof by ranking is if I take a room with 100 human beings, mixed age, both genders, just a sample of 100 humans from different places, and I line them up by their height. That's a ranking. So I put the shortest on one end, the tallest on the other, and I have 100 people lined up by the height. Now, what two things did I just prove? I proved that, people come in different heights, and that I have the intelligence to line them up by size and shape. But if I take the same 100 people and change the criteria, I'm now going to line them up by the month and the day of the month that they were born. Not the year they were born. I don't care about their height. I don't care about their gender. Just the month and the day of the month they were born. And I start with January the 1st and I go through December 31, and I put the 100 people in that order. What have I proven? I have proven that people are born on different days of the year, and I have the intelligence to do it. But in either case, did I prove anything about their heritage? And the answer is absolutely no. I didn't prove that they're married to each other. I didn't prove that they're father and son, mother, daughter, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins. Again, if I were to go out in the woods and find the skeleton of a dead deer that presumably died from natural causes, if there were enough bones still left when I found the skeleton or a partial skeleton, I might be able to identify its gender. I might be able to get a good concept of within a year of its age when it died. It was 7 years old, it was 10 years old. That's scientifically very possible. However, could I prove by getting these bones only that it ever had offspring? And the answer is no. Therefore, his method of proof, which is cladistics, that's the fancy scientific name evolutionists want to use, but it is a totally false method of proof. And as I said, it's the second worst method of proof in science, proves absolutely nothing. And so the ability to line things up by size and shape proves nothing that one evolved from the other. The same thing could be done by taking a unicycle, putting it next to a bicycle, next to a motorcycle, next to an automobile, next to a semi. Did I just prove that semis evolved from unicycles? After all, it is a logical order or sequence. But I think everybody starts to see that this is a totally false method of proof and proves absolutely nothing. There's no data at all. It's human intelligence being able to line things up by size and shape, and that is all it is.
And at the end of the day, it seems like it's all based on a primary assumption that, universal common ancestry is true. So they're force fitting everything into their classification scheme. But aren't there inconsistencies, Dr. Grady, such as convergent evolution?
Oh, well, if you're going to mention convergent evolution, you've got to mention divergent evolution in the same breath.
Right.
You see, evolution cannot be disproven simply because it doesn't matter what I find or they find that would disprove evolution. They have a fairy tale for adults in their book of Proverbs, which will cover the sin. So if we see that there are different organisms that have come to the same solution through a random chance evolutionary process, for instance, according to evolutionists, flying, the ability to fly, has evolved in many different creatures. So insects fly, birds fly, reptiles fly, mammals fly. I mean, we've all found winged reptiles, again, bats. And so they say flight has evolved in these many times. And so they call that these various mechanisms for flight were because these different organisms all converged on the same solution. However, if I find something that appears that they are moving away from each other, that's called divergent evolution. Well, we can have that too, because that supposedly is the tree of life, diversion. So it doesn't matter whether they're converging or diverging, it's still evolution. And again, this is a fairy tale. They can make any observed thing fit into their religion, provided that you are willing to be deceived by one of their fairy tales.
Well, that's a great point. Therefore, is their theory at the end of the day, is it even falsifiable then if everything can be force fit into their religion, as you've stated, Dr. Grady?
Well, that's just it. In a technical sense, in a technical scientific sense, it's impossible to scientifically disprove evolution. First of all, it's a religion, it's not science. And secondly, it doesn't matter what they find, they will propagandize, they will spin. They're experts at the media spin kind of thing. They will tell a story that says, well, yeah, this appears to refute evolution, but if we think about it this way, then it fits into our theory of evolution. Now, from a very technical standpoint, you can't prove creation or evolution using science simply because the modern scientific method requires that we work in the present. By definition, the acceptance of creation or evolution is historical. I do believe that evolution, as an evolutionist, occurred in the past. Today, as a creationist, I believe that creation occurred in the past. The problem is no scientist today can go back in time and observe it happening. We can't change parameters to see what the differences would be. When we talk about the historical sciences, such as paleontology, archaeology, others, what we're doing is we're looking at physical evidence. And we have our interpretation of that evidence, but we can't experiment. And so I make reasonable interpretations of the physical evidence, but I can't go back in time and prove it. So, but because they're historical by nature, you can't prove either one using the modern scientific method. But when you cannot use the modern scientific method to test something directly, how do you prove it? You have to use the indirect method of proof. And that is where we come up as superior. Because in the indirect method of proof, what happens is you build two models. There's the model of evolution, the model of creation. We make reasonable predictions from those models. For instance, in the case of evolution, a reasonable prediction would be things are getting bigger, better, faster, smarter over time. A reasonable prediction of creation is that all things were created whole, complete, perfect to begin with, and have either continued as they are with decay or have been completely eliminated by extinction. Those are reasonable predictions of the models. And then what I do is I take all the physical evidence that I have and, well, I ask myself the question, which of the two models, which of the two sets of predictions fits the facts that I know best? And I can say this categorically to anybody in the audience. There is no scientific law, there is no natural process, and only some of the physical evidence that can be predicted or explained by the model of evolution. Every law of science, every natural process, and all the physical evidence can be explained or predicted by the model of creation. Therefore, the model of creation is a vastly superior model to that of evolution.
Right, I totally agree. All the empirical evidence fits perfectly, from a biblical based starting point.